Hey, what's up, guys? Little man with a big opinion here. And today we're going to talk a little bit about stuff going on in the news and the video topics that I've got pulled up on my laptop over here after I re-unlock it. Sorry, I heard the dogs knock something down. But today's video, I've got 3 articles pulled up, mostly talking economics and why it's an issue for preppers. And we'll go through that. I'll give you some solutions, what I'm doing to help prepare myself, my household for it. And I think this is information you should hear about. So if you haven't heard about this, I'll also put a link in the description below to the 3 news articles, as well as my firsthand experience. I've been doing DoorDash lately, and I can see issues as I pick up people's food and deliver it. And then lastly, if you got a friend or family member that hasn't been hearing about this stuff, because, you know, I'll go ahead and toss in a 4th type article, or it's not really, it's an article tied in with a poll. But if you have a friend or family member that hasn't heard this information, then share the video with them. Let's start off with the first thing. I'm pretty sure it's up on Timcast, and it shows, I think they polled like 3,000 people, and the Democrats think the economy is doing good or better, and then most of the Republicans think it's doing awful. We can kind of tie that up with, party line semantics, but the independents, which, figures range from 10% to 40% of the U.S. population, they also side with the Republicans on this one, saying the economy is not doing great. After we talk about these statistics and other articles related to it, I mean, at least numbers wise, I think the independents and Republicans are correct on this one. So, this first article is from Bloomberg. They're talking about, the food shortages. It says that milk farmers in the UK are having to dump milk from their collections because they don't have enough truckers to transport it, and they'd rather something get a hold of it than it just spoil inside their tanks. In Vietnam, the army has been deployed to help with the rice harvest this year, and in Brazil, the coffee harvest. It took 120 days to, pick everything and, get it packaged up when it normally takes 90 days. So they got it all done. So I wouldn't expect to see a shortage there, but it took them an extra month. And I've talked about coffee prices going up. So a big portion of coffee comes from Brazil. So I would expect to see higher coffee prices. The next little graph on here is from the UN, and it goes from January up to July of right now, and it's talking about global food price rises during the pandemic. And they've got meat, dairy, cereals, oils, and sugars on here. And they've got a chart that shows 50% increase, 100, 150, and 200. Oils peaked in April and they kind of came down in July, but they're just over 150% price increase. Cereals are sitting in between 100 and 100. Everything else is sitting between 100 and 150% price increase. Cereals the next highest, dairy after that, and then meat and sugar are neck and neck. But all of these food items are above a 100% price increase. And if you haven't noticed at your, local grocery store, the prices going up, then what you probably have noticed is like you're not individually paying attention to food prices, but the 200 that you used to spend at the grocery store, you're bringing home less and less and less. So that's one of the issues. Next thing that ties into it is back around mid-July to the end of July, OPEC, they had a standard meeting, and basically the U.S. and other European countries were like, things are kickstarting, getting back to normal. We need you to, in go back to what you were producing oil wise, a year ago, 15 months ago, and they're being pretty doggish on it. They basically said, "Yep, we're going to increase it," and it's only gone up. I think it says like 5% in the article, which from the other thing that they were saying is it needs to go up. Here, let's see. It needs to go up about 30% to go back to the old production. And that is, completely tied in with you paying extra at the gas pump. On top of that, shale and fracking companies in the U.S. Typically in the past, if we've gotten less oil from other countries, then they have increased their production to try to keep things stable, and they're not really jumping on that. I think our future is heading towards, I think we'll always produce, gas, oil, and coal, but I think it'll be in a very limited capacity. For instance, I believe gas will cost 10, 15 a gallon, but most people are driving electric cars, and that's only for your antique. I do see a forward trend of switching off of combustion engines and going with a battery, but I don't think it's going to be around anytime soon. And so with that, people are going back to work, they're traveling more. Without getting political, we spent, the better part of a year being told, get the vaccine, life can go back to normal. And a lot of states and different organizations are sticking to that. You've got a really good chance of not showing any symptoms, and the vaccine is working for you. So you want, to get back up and get back out there. And so starting around April, I would say a lot of the red leaning states were like, you've got the opportunity to get the vaccine, so let's get back to work, let's get things cooking. And so the demand for gasoline has gone back up. I don't think it's quite at the level of it was, in 2019 before the pandemic, but it is slowly and it's slowly increasing. So supply and demand is a big issue right now. The article does say they think the gas prices will only go up a little bit more, or they're going to stay, stagnant at what they're at, but they don't expect a huge price decrease for at least the rest of this year. So, I can kind of attest to that. We started out sitting at like 215, 210 a gallon. Shot all the way up to about 273 where I'm at, and now it's gone back down to 263 with no changes in about 2 weeks. Walmarts tend to stay pretty on top of, price changes for that kind of thing. But in your area, like places in California, it's still, $4 and $5, and there are places where it's cheaper. And, they say they think it's tapering off, and, I really hope for that. So with that increased gas price, the food that its price has already gone up. Part of that is because of the gas going up. The other part of that, like I said, in the UK, they're not getting any milk out because they don't have truckers to transport it. Same issue here in the US, same issue in Australia, from what I've read. There are a few states still giving the federal bonus for staying at home at your COVID unemployment. And depending on your state, if you were still receiving that federal bonus, you were making roughly 16, 17 an hour to just stay at home, which is pretty extreme. Um, and now that things are trying to, go back to normal, a lot of these people don't want to go back to making, $8 an hour, $10 an hour, even 15 an hour, because they were making more sitting at home doing nothing. So the last article that I have for you is the August job reports for the United States. Unemployment went down as it was expected to 5.2% from 5.4%. But the scary number, which they also don't include, anything in this article about this other part, was we only added 235,000 jobs out of the expected 752,000. They said wages went up either 0.2 or 0.3%, and that's mostly because states like Oregon have fully implemented hiring 14 and 15-year-olds, because a lot of the stores, if you haven't noticed, or restaurants, they're only doing drive-through. They don't have enough employees to keep a lobby clean and staffed and have a cashier at the front, so they're only doing their drive-through. Add on to that shortages of supplies, and most stores where I live, like for instance the Jason's Deli, they're normally open 9 to 9. They've got a big taped, they cut a piece of receipt, and they're closing at 7. And it's partially due because their supply truck comes in and they cannot keep the store open those extra 2 hours each day, because they would run out of food before their next shipment came in. Same thing at Chili's. I went to go pick up an order from Chili's, and they were completely out of bone-in and bone-out wings. Buffalo Wild Wings, it's in their name. Picked up food from there, and they were out of bone-in wings or traditional wings. So there's a shortage of food, tied in with things reopening and people wanting to go back to their daily lives. They want to go back out to eat and stuff. Some economists believe that there's not a shortage. They just think, the supply chain hasn't completely caught up. And others, which I believe the others on this, is we had so long of a period of a decreased need for some of these items with people staying home, that the system hasn't, caught back up. Farmers a year ago were told they needed to slash production by 10, 15, 20%, because that percentage was going to a restaurant that's not open anymore. So you're going to grow or cultivate or slaughter this animal, but it doesn't have any end destination, so don't do it. And now this year started, and they're like, hey, we actually need that 30% back. And so they're having to go back to a time, and so they've got to reinvest money. They've got to put in the extra time, and it's just something that takes time. So what does all this have to do with prepping? Well, we're looking at apparently in 2020, freelance economic contribution was 1.2 trillion. I don't know what that has to do with this. I don't know why it's playing video. So what's this got to do with prepping? If you're spending more money on the food that you need to eat today, then that means less funding to go into food to stock up for SHTF. You've got less money to purchase ammo, to buy land, water storage, all your prepping goods. With the increased pricing of your daily caloric consumption, you're spending less on prepping. If your job hasn't given you a pay raise, but you're spending 10 cents more a mile because gas prices have gone up, then your money is not going to be put into prepping stuff. And then, the oil stuff, they're saying it's tapering off, but from what I read from this article, we get a lot of oil from OPEC, and they're not increasing oil production at anywhere near a quick enough rate. Some states are going back into lockdown, some states haven't lifted different lockdown restrictions. Once we get to a point where at least, function wise things are back on track, then if they're not increasing their oil production at a pace to keep up with things going back to normal, then you could probably see an increase in gas prices. Food prices going up. If a country is having to use their military to harvest rice, then there's a strong possibility that that rice will cost more. If, the whole thing with there being this job shortage is people are taking from a system and not putting stuff back into a system. So that trucker that supplied, in one truckload, that say he does one truckload every 3 days, and he's supplying the goods for 50 people. Well, just because that trucker stopped taking that load doesn't mean those 50 people aren't getting those goods anymore. You times that by hundreds and thousands, and we have a system that is slowly falling apart. And that is, signs of concern for me. These people still need food. They're not going to stop needing food. But at some point, if these economic incentives to get people to go to work aren't going to be enough, or people quit based off of, their working conditions, vaccine mandates, whatever's going on, eventually it will get to a point where there's absolutely, that one trucker that was supplying those 50 people, it'll get to a point where one trucker now has to carry enough stuff for 70 people. But the caveat in that is you are getting, say, 2,500 calories from your shopping trip. They're putting a limit back on food. Now you're only picking up 1,800 calories each trip. And it could get to a point where there's just not enough. There will be food scarcity. We're still in hurricane season, so where I live, most people panic buy right at the very end. And with the already stressed out system, these people probably won't get enough stuff to be able to ride out that situation like they did, last summer or 2 summers ago. And it's just a snowballing effect that as a prepper, having the food in place beforehand, when your store's supply, comes in and it's only 80% of what it's supposed to be, you're not running into the issue of not having the calories you need to function. The job report looks pretty bad. The other metric or number I was going to give you is almost 10 million people resigned from their jobs this last summer. And it was mostly due to working conditions, and they didn't like what they were doing. They probably heard all this stuff about people sitting at home and making more money sitting at home than they would at a job. I don't think I got anything else to talk about. So with that, if you found this information useful, I'll say it again, like and subscribe. If you got a friend or family member that would benefit from this conversation that we had, share the video with them, and I'll catch you in the next one.